Podcast 9, The True Use of Power. In this podcast, and most likely the following ones, I'm going to talk about the natural laws of energetic utilization, because that goes with power. But I want to begin a completely different place that most of you are most likely, to some degree, aware of. It's a type of alchemy, and we have had many people across history that have tried to figure out how to manipulate reality as a weird leftover from the powers we used to have when the fourth dimension was present inside our reality that allowed us to transform things using the energetic patterns. Today we can see the energetic patterns with our inner eye, and we understand the energetic patterns, but not as a means to an end where we create the pattern to create change. We can do it for sure, but we most likely see it as the architecture and the information system behind all manifested layers of existence. There are certain things that are important to understand. First and foremost, within the base program, people are on the stagnant cross. So attempting to use these sciences within the base program leads to imbalance, because the stagnant cross is an unforgiving cross. What is taken from one arm must be given in one of the other arms to uphold the balance. As in, if you take something from one arm and you are not replacing it, then it will be taken from the other four arms, or the other three arms, sorry about that, so that the cross is maintained. And if there's nothing to take from, well, then it will begin to take from the energy system and deplete that, which has happened to most that have used magic, witchcraft, and other forms of wrongful use of energy and consciousness. Which is why, eventually, as we saw it in the later days of Atlantis, that people's energy systems were deteriorating, and as they were deteriorating, then whatever technology that upheld their reality field were deteriorating as well, leading to the complete destruction. Because that's how it goes when you're utilizing the reality field energies for wrongful purposes, selfish purposes, and personal gain. That's a hard-learned lesson from many civilizations that have dropped out of the fourth dimension and are no longer able to continue or adapt their existence to what is possible and what is not. We have a world today where there's little magic. Most is done by machines, and by that there is not this reciprocity rate that must be paid. The exchange rate when we are using machines is very little, unfortunately, because that leads to a lot of destruction and wrongful use of energy, but it doesn't really ripple back into the ones that have created it. And that's part of the races that are on the steep regression path. They have learned to disconnect to the technology, so they are no longer being depleted by their inventions. So there is no reciprocity rate in these worlds. We're here talking about the machine worlds and the android worlds. But that's not of our concern here. Here we're talking about us and our co-creation. We have recognized there are certain symbols that have gone out through the course of history, and they are to be seen as technology more than symbols. They show a dynamic, they show a force, they show how certain things work. And let us just work with the 5 dimensions of our reality. And that's the pentagram. First and foremost, it has been often said that the pentagram is a representation of the human, because the human exists in the 5th realm. Technically, that's not accurate, because humanity is still in the 4th realm. So the humanity, symbol of humanity, is the cross, because our higher order awareness is crucified on the cross, on the stagnant cross, that prevents us from truly evolving and developing into what we're supposed to be. And on top of the cross is the Ouroboros, of the snake. So that's our symbol, unfortunately. And that curse must be broken for whatever means and ends that leads to the dissolving of the snake. And once it's gone and we're no longer under its deception, we can then begin to work with the cross and understand what the cross truly is. So let us work with the first 4 levels of the cross and this reality as we are part of in a symbolic or technological manner. 1, the number 1, that's the vertical line from above to below, And it actually also goes from below to above, but that comes later on. So it's something that comes into existence from above, which it was originally. It has been talked about in many different scenarios and many different interpretations. For instance, Edgar Cayce, that's one of the later ones that talked about we came as spirits and turned into matter. You have it in the Genesis that came from the Garden of Eden as spirit beings. At least that's how the rabbis interpret it, where they were manifested in the likeness of the Elohim as male and female. Just a little throw in there, which is why most alchemists that have an understanding of Hebrew then said, well, then the Elohim must be the father-mother, because since it was mirrored into male-female, that means that the Elohim must be a mother-father figure. And that goes with some of the alchemical symbols, just so you get that one in, that when the alchemists were working with the understanding of the divine, they understood it was a father-mother, often represented as an androgen being. And you have heard me say many times that outside this enclosure, there is no gender, and there is no genitals, and there is none of the sexuality or sexual organs as we know of it. And that's because at that point, we could say that the original civilizations were androgen. I find that inaccurate, but that's how it's symbolized. So the original state of being, of who and what we were, have been either seen as a kind of a unity where male and female were in one being, and these two symbolic representations of forces, the female force and the male force, are to be found in our chromosomes in different variations, where we were all supposedly to have an XX chromosome, where men had lost one of their legs of the Y chromosome that used to be an X chromosome too, and that was what connected us to the fourth dimension. And that means that males are more tied into the third dimension, or the previous universal cycle, via the Y chromosome, and by that they are closer to the snake than females. Females are connected as a XX chromosomal feature to some of the past existences of the original fourth cycle civilizations, and some of what's left of these in the underworld, unfortunately. So that's one of the X's of females, which kind of is seen and symbolized in the female forces of the female deities, on one hand being the ones of prosperity and propagation and all sorts of things that are coming to life, and at the same time are also symbolically representing the dark Madonna, the evil force of all of the angry and wrathful experiences of the past of the female genome and what females have gone through inside this civilization, which is locked into that part of the X chromosome of females, which ties us to the lost realms that are inhabited by what we could say all of the hurt and disaster and deception and not deception, but all of the pain of all the females, the collective female pool that is behind that X chromosome. Similarly, as men in the Y chromosome are connected to the collective pool of deception here especially, and wrongful use of power and all sorts of egotistical ideologies that leads to a use of the third cycle type of energies that were the main issue as the part of the previous universal cycles. So in a way, the men have co-creative powers as well, but it taps into the previous universal cycles, which we can see in many of what men actually are creating is often something that goes within the machine worlds, or lead to some kind of destruction, or lead to some kind of chaos. The females are creating human beings, which is unnatural, and in that are also exemplifying some of these forces to various degrees, mostly within their emotional field. So men are tied to their brain through the Y chromosome, females to the heart via the XX chromosome and their uterus, unfortunately, because the female heart is connected to the female uterus. So this technically means that females are the gates can become a portal of energies from previous civilizations being born into existence, and men become the co-creators of the ideas and the gadgets and the machines and the disconnected types of items that belongs to the previous universal cycles. And in that way, both men and women are contributing to the disastrous, destructional forces of this reality field, which is what we must work against. Men through their contemplation practices and learning to ignite the heart and then still the brain and reconfigure the brain structure to hold the beneficial and compassionate energies of the XX configuration, and with that begin to connect the heart and the brain, and with that come up with some different types of inventions that is for the highest good of the many and not just for their own sole private purposes of showing how magnificent they are in their creational abilities and focused on pursuing and tracking down whatever they want to own as theirs and claim as theirs, either by penetration or by deception or by overtaking. Which, again, when we talk about females, are learning how to also administer the heart and brain, actually activate the brain field to be less focused on the emotional issues and solutions, but learning to be co-creative in their heart and brain as well. And once that happens, letting go of all of their lower level limbed desires, as men also must. So in that way, eventually we will, as we create a stronger heart and brain connection, females, yes, also working with compassion, but more learn to work with the co-creative forces as part of their neural networks and how their magnificent XX tribal chromosomal figuration can turn into, yet again, connect to the progressive energies, and by that begin to manifest things that are beyond just living life forms, but actually something that also is for the highest good of the many, that for some are organic vessels, for others are within the sciences. So we're all on the path to find harmony and balance in what we truly were. So in that way, we can say that male and female is not as much gender-based. It's about the heart and the mind, and that is the symbolic representation. The vertical line is the heart and the brain. So it's about connecting the heart and the brain to one unity where what is above and what is below, and we are not talking the matter worlds. We are talking about what is in the heart, what is in the true timelines, in the true level of reality, are yet to become interconnected between our higher order energy system and our lower order energy system. And the heart is the one that transforms the lower order energy system, and the brain is the access point from where the holographic-energetic architecture, that is our true nature, can begin to descend and give us abilities beyond normal human capacity. Once that happens, we become beings of co-creation, and that's where the natural laws of energy comes in and becomes very important. Of course, there's more to say to this. But when we're talking about becoming androgen beings, again, we're not talking about becoming half man, half woman, which is ridiculous, but it's illustrated that way. Of course, it's not to be taken literal. It just means that Jung played with the same ideas, that men must reconcile with their anima, their inner female, and females must reconcile with their inner male or their animus. And these two beings, both within men and within females, if the animus is neglected in the female, it turns into the dark shadow, which is symbolized in some of the dark male beings that are attached to quite a lot of the Pleiadian females inside this reality, unfortunately, as part of their enslavement program. And the men are connected to a dark inner female that's connected to the underworld, a kind of a witch figure, the Black Madonna that leads them into all sorts of hateful actions, of which if they are not in control of their dark inner female, well, then they become these female haters and whatever they're projecting to the outside. Females with the dark animus, if we're playing with that idea that it is just a shadow, well, then they're projecting that out into unfruitful relationships that are mirroring back to them that they need to connect to their inner masculinity, transform that into not a wrathful father figure, but something that is kind and caring and actually protects and takes true care of them. And in that yearning for that protective male figure, they're projecting that out, finding all sorts of males that are exactly exemplifying the opposite until the female learns to stop looking at it from the outside and co-creating it at the inside and become a whole being. Men to the same degree, instead of looking for the whores and the sluts and whatever, stop looking for the dark female turn the dark female into the beautiful fairy being that she's rightfully supposed to be, a fragile being that needs his protection, from where he learns to protect his own vulnerability and innocence and learn to work with that in a wholesome way so that he too can project out to reality the kindness in females and with that build the bridge. So that's the number 2. Number 1 is where we descend what we have in our higher order energy system into the lower order energy system. That's the first step. That's the pillar 1-7. Then we have the horizontal line. That's number 2. Number 2 goes from in and out. So what we are on the inside will be mirrored on the outside. Jung call that projection mechanism. And when there is a bridge between the inner and the outer, and we are in balance with what we are on the inside and it's being mirrored to the outside, well, then there is synchronicity, as Jung called it. We can say that's where the integration of the higher order levels, and Jung tells that as well, once we have integrated all of these lost pieces of ourselves, we become a wholesome being. And synchronicity is the result where what we experience on the outside matches what we are on the inside. And that's the primary goal, to become wholesome beings. That's the true understanding of the cross. As long as these are disconnected and not working correctly, it's a stagnant cross that has very little mercy on our being and crucifies us to the degree of our own destruction, as it's said in the story of the Christ. These are esoteric understandings and alchemical understandings of specific forces, and they are there for a warning. When we begin to work with the forces of reality, and that's the 4 elements, we are to understand the necessity of the different types of manifestation possibilities there are inside this reality. We have understood with the number 1, that's the magician, that what we are comes from within and should, hopefully, most likely, come from the soul, come from the high order levels of our being, of the androgen father-mother aspect of us as males and females in true harmony with what we are. So whatever we project to the world will be met through the true correct connection between the heart and mind that is projected out to reality in a balance between all oppositions, because that is in essence what male and female actually is. So as we learn to work with number 2, that is the otherness, where we are in alignment with what is outside is also what is inside. And we have that understanding that whatever we are will be mirrored back to us from a reality. And as we are in true balance, then the outer reality will also be in true balance. And that is where the functional cross begins to go into the understanding of changing things and transforming things, and it becomes a wheels within wheels that actually turns into a proper transformational process. But we are not there yet because we're in the base program, and we are in the basic learning lessons of how to administer the energies, again, also symbolized in the tarot cards. Number 2 is often seen as the high priestess, and if you notice, she has got 2 pillars, the white pillar, the dark pillar, and that's where we learn to use our powers in a manner that says either we do for good or we do for evil, but either way, there has to be a balance point between the 2 and the understanding of what is in between the 2, and that's why she's sitting in the middle on a throne, and she has different regalia or symbols to represent the different laws of energy, the Torah, the Bible, whatever has been given of wrongful type of information. There are also often depicted scrolls that goes with the occult and the esoteric levels of the world as we know of it. The occult is often associated with the laws of reality, the esoteric with the level of the soul. Again, so you understand these differences of old teachings that has been long forgotten. Now, I'm not recommending you looking all of this up. You're just taking it as this is how it has been worked with. And these are part of the secrets of the ones that are within all secret societies. They learn this the hard way. You see, number 1, as I have taught you through the 1-7 pillar and the use of the principles and the rules and the laws to be a kind human being that at the same time also is willing and eager to defend your position without causing more harm than necessary, all depending on what type of original vow you have and what you entered with into this reality that's part of your true nature or your consciousness potentials. As me, being a protector and an engineer and a creator of things that leads to the highest possible outcome for all involved, and at the same time being this oriented, so to speak, and manipulated with and turning into a warrior, which is what we could say also a proper manner of being a protector, but not one that look up wars, but one that defends what is there, but to a degree where it no longer makes sense or purpose because it's out of whack. It is distorted and regressed, and with that, within the artificial fourth dimension, what truly was a protector and a caretaker of reality that stood strong in my own strength and assisted and helped others to grow, has in the artificial fourth been turned into programs where I had to defend myself again and again until the line between what am I actually protecting and what is actually going on the outside became so blurred that I could barely figure out what was up and down or in and out. And that's the way that they distort us on the cross. Whatever we were when we came in here, for those who came in as kind beings, turned into angry, self-punishing lunatics and onward and so forth. We have seen it again and again. And this is part of our journey to recognize that through all the deception lies a truth that often is the opposition. Or if we have this distorted idea that we are the best paid people in the whole world and we are kind and gentle and we have that illusion, because it is an illusion, then this shadow has not been acknowledged. And often the opposition of that is also an illusion, but it's a more harmful one, because once you're there, you rarely recognize what you need to work with. So that's one of the lesser positive ways of being crucified on the cross of illusion or the cross of matter and the cross of stagnation. In core essence, as you know as the magicians, everything is changeable and should be changeable. You understand through the high priestess that everything goes under the laws, and the laws of good and evil, and the laws between polarities and different types of systems that are teaching us how to balance that, so that the inner and outer bridge is in alignment with the laws of reality, often symbolized as the Torah or the Hebrew letters that supposedly should be the flame letters of the true God, of Elohim, the male-female God, that were not a God, but actually were forces, the supreme powers of all reality, the divine, that exemplifies the male and female. As this is twisted into all sorts of dark magical purposes and rituals and ways of doing things where sexual magic and other stuff comes in, we learn that that's a complete no-go. The stagnant cross has no mercy. What is taken must be given back in some form. And if it was taken by forces that are unnatural, then the means of which it must be returned will be equally unnatural. And sometimes the exchange rate will be higher. So for those of us who are trotting this path, we understand that as we go into principle 3, that is, or the number 3, that is the representation of Earth, the triangle, the Trinity. We also understand it's technically not a triangle. It is a trinity, which is important to understand, so that we get the full picture of the dynamics of the Trinity. And this is best seen as 3 sticks. Instead of having a triangle, we are taking 3 lines and put them together. It's a little bit like a Y, or the Y chromosome, which can either have 2 legs on the ground and 1 stick up. That's technically the symbol of the animal man. Or the other way around, where you have it with the 2 sticks up and 1 line down to the earth, where it then becomes the chalice or the cup that is then ready to hold the higher levels of abilities that goes with the true understanding of reality as it actually is, as we turn from the man that has his feet on the ground and the head in the sky and not really using his or her arms for anything other than to grab what is ours and ours to have alone because we are selfishly oriented. Through our practices of contemplation, meditation, and kind mindfulness practices, we turn that upside down, and then we become with the arms up in the air and the legs become unified to the ground. We put our legs together, become a unified being, arms reaching up to the sky, to the soul, being ready to embrace that. And that's the chalice, that's the true cup, that's the cup of Christ. That's where we reach out and become the vessel from where our true consciousness can begin to descend. That's the understanding of the Trinity. And that has too been distorted into all sorts of weird symbolic representations of Father, Mother, Child, and whatnot. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and all of these deceptive ways of mirroring the processes that we go through. With that, As we become the chalice, as we become the container, the vessel, the ones that embraces what is true and higher and is our true self and not necessarily just the soul, but the true potentials, we become the true alchemist. We become the one that embraces nature and reality as it actually is, in full understanding of what we are and what we could be and what we have been and what we can become if we embrace all of these levels of our being, transforming and turning it into gold in the manner that it's supposed to. The true search for gold is not the gold of metal, it is the gold of the true knowledge. That's the true alchemical principles. So that's the number 3, where things come into manifestation. If we are with the man on the feet on the ground, we must always use circles and symbols and all sorts of magic to get what we want, because the hands we have, they are just grabbing for selfish purposes. If we turn it upside down, become the vessel, the cup, then we embrace all of the true knowledge. That is what we are truly seeking. And that's the Trinity, where the inner and outer becomes in a balance point, where we can then begin to mirror these things out to reality and really begin to participate as part of the world as it truly is. In the esoteric initiations, the third is in initiations as learning to master the Trinity is the true initiation. That is technically often seen as the first initiation. Although, again, this is a little bit of a number mess up that is there to trick, because you have the first initiation when you master the line, you have the second initiation when you master the vertical line, the horizontal line and the vertical line in one unity, and with that you master the cross. Then you are ready for the third initiation, that is the mastering of the Trinity and how that actually works, and turn you into the vessel from where the higher order energies and consciousness can begin to descend the true wisdom, the true knowledge. With that you understand there is a 1, 2, 3 level of initiations that you must take, but you also understand that the third initiation is actually the true initiation. So you have 1, 2, 3, that's the first Trinity that you master. And once you master that Trinity, you get the next Trinity that goes between 3, 4, and 5, and technically also 4, 5, and 6. This will be built in later on. So you have this weird step ladder where 1, 2, 3, and you have a 3, and then you have another 3, 3, 4, 5, and then you have that circle that goes with the number 3, 3, of which you are initiated into the true sciences and the knowledge of what is, because you have become the vessel of true knowledge. And at the same time, you also become the seeker and the grounder and the co-creator with the other number 3, that you then begin the next step ladder process of number 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so that in a way turns the true man into number 6. Yes, these are complicated being matters and these are complicated understandings. So what is then, we have the number 4, which is the true understanding of the crosses. That's where you learn to master the crosses and the governance of the reality energies. With the crosses comes the understanding of how to operate with the 4 elements. The 4 elements are water or fluidity, it is fire or heat, it is earth or crystallized solidified matter or types of energy. And then you have the latter one that is air, that is everything that is kind of moving things from one level to another. That is technically what air is. So we understand that it's not just elements as we're seeing it in reality, because if you deconstruct these and look into what they truly are, you will see that everything that appears to be crystallized is exactly what it is crystallized. It goes into beautiful crystalline patterns. That is the manifest reality. That's beautiful crystalline patterns. If you can change the crystalline patterns, you can change the property of what is solidified into something else. That has got very little possibilities as the reality is now because of the lack of the 4th dimension. But it used to be that way. And that's why many magicians and alchemists and witches and whatnot have tried to manipulate that and paid a high price for that. Because once you begin to tamper with the stagnant cross and try to make it into the changeable, flexible cross without having connection to the higher order levels of your existence, and had turned into the vessel, the chalice of the true cup of the Christ, the consciousness of Christ, then you will the true blood, the true living, life-giving force that is symbolized in the blood, then you are doing it as with the Trinity, with the feet on the ground, and with that you pay a high price. That always leads to crucifixion in an unpleasant manner. The price will be paid, if not in this life, then in other lifetimes, often called karma. Okay, so we have the number 4, that's the true cross, where we understand we're there working with the elements. Only if we have been initiated in the number 3-3 sequence, where we have gone through initiation 1, 2, and 3, and then started all over in the 3rd level, where we understand the Trinity, what the Trinity truly is, and have become the cup, and with that become the whirling vortex that leads us to the changeable cross, from where we can begin to transform energy. Until then, we are on the stagnant cross. So that's a must being to be able to be a true co-creator. Again, we are talking within the systems of alchemy and witchcraft and true understanding, the esoteric, occult understanding of what it truly means. Again, remember the esoterics and the mystics are all about connecting to the soul. So that's technically initiation 1 and 2. The occult level, where you begin to understand the forces and how reality really operates, that's the occult level, and that comes with the 3rd initiation, that is the 1st initiation. Again, understanding these levels, that makes it very difficult. So the step 1, 2, and up to 3 is leaving the base program, where we recalibrate the 3 lower fields into becoming the cup, the callus, the vessel, the container of our true consciousness potentials. Once we have that gone there, we go through again a set of doors and a judgment, where we are then going into the true path of initiation, which is why the first 3 levels are the leaving of the base program, leaving the world behind, and becoming the fool. And then once we have that, then we understand the true understanding of the magic, the magician's card number 1, the high priestess card number 2, and the emperor's card number 3, where we become co-creators, the vessel. That's why it's symbolized as a female, where male and female are unified in one being, with heart and mind reconnected in kindness and mindfulness and understanding of what must be done for the highest good of the many. That all co-creation is not about conquering things, but about giving things, producing things, so that life can blossom and everything goes into fruition. For females, it's about getting their own power, as you will also see with the emperor, where she, instead of just being the birth giver and the one that constantly give birth to children, are then becoming not just, unfortunately, we haven't got the master in the female version because that has been distorted into a mistress, but that was the original word. But she becomes the empress of the world as it is, her own being, her own body, all of her own co-creative powers will then be something that is seen as she has the earth in itself with a cross on top. She becomes the master female of her own destiny, and by that begin to take her life back as it was rightfully done so, and undoing the curse of the Yahweh Elohim as the curse of birth. So we are now understanding the first 3 cards. Then we can go to card number 4, which is the Emperor. And the Emperor is an old warrior, as you will see, and that's where what is it to be an old warrior, but also a king, one that reigns over the forces of the world. And that is where both as men and women, we must go there. So we can say it doesn't have to be a male, but it goes with the ability, the strength, and the power to master the forces of the world, which is what the Emperor is signifying or showing to us. That's why he's a warrior, he's in armor, he understands the destructive forces of the world, he has battled them, he has conquered them, and he's now sitting on the throne and reigning over what he has achieved and what he has conquered. That is what that symbolizes. Not necessarily in battles, it can just as much be the defending of what is true and rightfully his or hers, as we have gained it through our true purpose of working with the different angles of reality. To throw in here the major arcana, these are the larger cards from the Magician to the Fool as card number 22, and also as card number 1, because the Fool is card number 1, showing us how ridiculously foolish we are as we're just walking blind around in the world, not knowing anything. But we also end up as the Fool in card number 22, because we learn the more we know, the less we actually do know, until we connect to the soul, and only only then will we have true knowledge. If we are walking through the 22 cards, actually 21 with the Fool as the 22nd, the 21 lines of the 21 paths of different forms of forces and energies and manifestation processes, we will be exactly like the Fool and will produce nothing but our own destruction. These are things that must be recognized as we are working our way through the different cards. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to go through the first 5 here because that is what matters to us as part of the 5-stick pentagram. That is not a pentagram because I'm going to teach you another way to keep the balance point within the 5 levels of co-creation inside this reality. So we know this reality has 5 dimensions. But we are at number 4. The 4 is also the flexible cross as we have come into because we have reached the initiation where we have become the cup, the vessel, the container of our soul potentials. If that is not achieved, then number 4 will just be the rigid old king that is just stuck in his way and then becomes the unflexible tyrant that is just literally shutting down everything and cutting down on everything that is against what he sees to be the truth. So that's the trap. So that's the way also to understand the tarot card or the major arcana card number 4. As we're working through number 1, 2, 3, and 4, we're also working with the minor arcana where we have the 13 cards of the staffs, the cups, the coins, and the swords that shows us different aspects of our lower fields to be worked with. The staff is often associated with the fire element. The cup is associated with the water element. The sword is associated with the air element, and the rings or the coins are associated with the earth element. And there we have the representation of how these 4 forces are represented in different dynamics inside reality, which goes with different aspects from its raw forces of the ace of water, ace of cups or ace of swords or whatever. That's the raw element into different divisions, again following the number sequence of a manifestation that comes into being. Number 2, the balance point. Number 3, the way that we're working within in Trinity. Number 4, how we change it into transformable different forms of actions inside this reality that leads to either our own crucifixion and regression or a true continuously transformative process that leads us into a true knower of what the world really is, and that's the Hierophant or the card number 5. It's often symbolized with, if you go with the feet on the ground type of Trinity, then you will see card number 5 as rigid religion, that everything becomes a creed, something you believe in and not something you actually have utilized to your true understanding. And with that, you can also kill and take and slay and take over what is not yours truly to take, as we have seen it so often inside reality. The understanding is that once you have become the cup, the chalice, the container, and you become the true sovereign being, that's the emperor of your own destiny and the forces and your past, present, and future, and with that you're administering your own kingdom to the degree that is suitable for you as an independent sovereign being, then you are also understanding that you can potentially, with the true wisdom, the true knowledge, become a teacher, one that shows others how to be in the world and how to administer the world, to become the true teacher and not a symbolic representation of stone buildings and temples and whatnot that are where priests are put in there, still having their feet on the ground and achieving that power for selfish purposes that has little to do with the true knowledge of what reality actually is. If that's the case, then the 3-5 will then turn into card number 15, that is the devil. But that's, again, as we're talking about the different understandings, because number 6 is the 2 angels, the father, mother, the male, female, the unified form of all oppositions and all polarities that turns into the unification of what we truly are. And with that, we connect to, as the esoterics call it, the solar angel. That's where the true possibilities and abilities really begin to descend, when all oppositions are completed and no longer stand in stark contrast to each other, but are working together to transform whatever we are. And that's the true androgen being, and that's where we don't need to go any further than that. Okay, so we are then having number 1, from above to below, that begins the journey of achieving and exploring who we truly and what we are in all ways and forms. Number 2, where inner and outer get into balance. Number 3, where the 3 aspects of what we are turns into a trinity, and with that change our very being, whether it's the trinity of what we were and what we are and what we will become, the past, present, and future, or it is the trinity between the ways that our original consciousness potentials were supposed to work, the clarification, the clearing, the developmental processes of the 3 lower fields, so they become the vessel, the callus, the container, so that the soul potentials can begin to come down, which is the 3rd initiation, where the true knowledge is obtained, often symbolized within the Freemason communities as the level 33, where you are in true contact with the true wisdom, which unfortunately within many Freemasons group has been associated with, due to their genetic composition, with some of the old factions that they aligned themselves with a long time ago to still have power inside this reality. We will just leave it at that, and I'm here associating or talking about the brotherhoods. So, number 3 is not a trinity, it's not a triangle, it is 3 sticks, 3 lines that are put together. Then we have number 4, that is often associated with a cross or with an X. And that too are 4 lines that are put together. And so with number 5, where we are the full master of this reality, that too are 5 lines that are put together that can either be where we can turn it upside down or whatever, but we're not working with that. We are working with the 5 sticks representing a full-blown human that has 2 legs on the ground and hands up to the air. So we have become the midpoint of earth and heaven, where we are the callus or the cup or the container with the arms stretched out to receive what we truly are. And at the same time, we're capable of manifesting, completing, and being part of this reality as what is often associated with Christ consciousness. It is interesting in that context that many people are talking about Sirius as being the main ruler and governor of the Christ consciousness. And there might be some truth to it, especially within the esoterics. But what is often overlooked is that Sothir, or the original Syrian manifestation in Egypt as part of the old brotherhoods, were actually a female. And she has that 5-stick figure above her head. So that's to be taken into consideration as well, that Sirius is not male, it is female energy. It's some of the original female energies that comes with the true kindness and understanding of what reality actually is. But the Syrians themselves eradicated that portion of their existence a long time ago, the Syrian beast, and that's why we only have the male version of it inside this reality as part of the quote-unquote crucified Christ consciousness. You will see in some of the more esoteric versions of what's left of the original teachings about the Christ consciousness also has different kind of female figures, which has often been associated with horse and different forms of females that are not to be taken seriously, as in kind of why would Jesus Christ or Jesus at the time team up with Maria Magdalena if she was a whore? Anyways, we'll just leave that as a slandering of the female powers to try and symbolize the original understanding of the male and female represented in the figure of the figure story of the journey towards embodying and reaching again the true knowledge of our higher order awareness, aka the Christ consciousness in the 5th dimension. The Christ consciousness is when the man himself transforms into becoming the callus, the cup, the container, and is soul infused. And that's what females can do too, because it's not just about the males that need to get to that point. Females need to get to that point as well. So the true use of power is the understanding of the journey that we are on, symbolized in the tarot cards, and what we are to learn, the different processes between inner and outer and above and below, and how we turn these forces into trinity structures that then begins to whirl around like wheels within wheels, from where we change the stagnant cross into a flexible dynamic cross, where we learn to work with the elements, and with that knowledge we turn into the true representation of the pentagram, of the true human being that is the God-man, the God-woman, the one that is unified, male and female stand together in one, where we're androgen beings, because if you look at the pentagram, you can do that. You can say that's both a male and a female in one being as well. It's genderless. It can be both We have our arms that reach to the sky so we can embrace what is given. And we have the legs firm on the ground, so representation of the God-man, the God-female on the planet Earth. And by that we become the co-creators. There is a little thing that must be said to this structure as well. The Trinity structure is also a symbolic representation of three different types of manifestation. There is the organic with holographic information in it that we often associate with a type of intelligence or a system or an order. There is order in the system. That's the organic things as we're seeing in trees and nature and animals and everything that has a type of what we could call mirrors a type of awareness, but it's not conscious. Then we have the organic with consciousness. That consciousness is the soul, the true consciousness that comes from the original civilizations we once were. That's the consciousness potentials of the real civilizations and not this lesser version that we have become today, where we are more like organic matter with different forms of energy fields that are conducting our well-being and existence like a machine, and very little as a conscious, progressive being that evolves and develops according to the circumstances around us. So that's the Trinity. The last leg of the Trinity is the non-organic level of reality that we will call kind of machines, that we will call automatic things that has no pattern or architecture, the things that are non-animated, that are just standing still. A rock is technically still animated, but it's a very slow animation, so it moves very, very slowly. But there is a pattern, it can change, and it does change. Erosion and destruction, as for instance of plastic or polymers or metal or any forms that are artificially created, that's the non-organic world. Everything that's created artificially, that is the wrongful use of energy and consciousness, because it lasts for a very long time, and when it finally begins to degrade, it pollutes and destroys and leads to unfortunate outcomes that are disastrous for the organic beings that are around these non-organic types of materials as we're seeing on our planet as well. Okay, so that's the Trinity, that we are in between three forms that we can choose to manifest within. And as a clever person that you have become, you will, of course, avoid as much as possible to manifest within items that are non-destructible, that are artificial and not part of the reality as it truly is. That, too, mirrors something that goes back to the previous universal cycle. So that's the third leg of the use of the previous universal cycle energies, and that's our shadow. That's the things that are creating havoc, that are creating destruction, and that we must transform into some kind of life force that actually gives life to the two other legs of the Trinity. That's where we become beneficial. If we're producing something that cannot be broken down, that is inorganic, we become the destroyers of worlds, to use Oppenheimer's saying. With that understanding, we are also saying, okay, that's the Trinity, 1, 2, and 3. Then number 4 in that understanding of alchemical processes are the 4 elements. They're often associated with a square. So now you have the understanding when you're working with the sticks or the lines, you're working with the soul potentials. When you're working with the platonic solids, let's use it that way, then you're working with something that's mathematical, observable, that can be changed into some kind of algorithm, some kind of program, and that's reality dynamics. So that is what we're talking about here. The reality dynamics has we had the Trinity with the organic, the non-organic, and the organic with consciousness. Then we have the 4 forces that are put together, often associated with water, the 4 elements, water, air, fire, and earth. And I'm here teaching you these 4 forces are to be seen as everything that's fluid, that's water, everything that's crystallized, that's earth, everything that can transform into heat or transformational processes, that's fire, and everything that can move from one state to another, that's air. So these are the 4 alchemical understandings of that square, that cube that runs this reality, hence also the cube technology that runs reality programs. Once you understand these four forces and they are locked into each other, it is good and prudent to also look into the understanding that if you mess with one level of the square that is fourth dimensional, it falls in and out on itself, then it will affect the other four levels. So all of the elements are tied together in that square. That's the cube, that's the unit of this reality. It's a four quadrant. It's a quadrant, it's a square, it's tied together. You can't move one leg of it, one side of it, without tampering with the other sides of it. So everything must be in a perfect balance always. Otherwise, the transformational processes will lead to a stagnation of your cross. That's how it mirrors back into the numbers of the soul with the numbers of reality, how they align with them, each other, in the true knowledge of how to actually operate with the different forces of the world. Which leads us to the number 5 and often put into the pentagram, which I would like to take out of the equation, even though I have used it in my books. The best way to see the pentagram are like 4 rings within each other, that where you can in the middle draw a pentagram if you like, but see it as equally 4 rings that are tied together. And with that understanding, you understand that all 5 elements, of which one is the blueprint, must be again in balance with each other. You can't take from one ring or one bubble or one sphere without tampering with the others, because it's locked in. It adjusts to each other. So if you're overusing one element, you will deplete the others, and that creates imbalance. And when there's imbalance, there's distortion. And when there's distortion, there's wrongful use of consciousness. So the true power in all of these number sequences is to learn to keep the balance and harmony, and that's what we've been working with, the coherence pattern. How do you create in a way that is transformative and give back, so that the 4 elements are transformed into the higher equivalent, where they're no longer locked into each other but become free sovereign agents within themselves, that then transforms into the pentagram, where they will become spheres of different types of energy and consciousness that unfolds different dynamics that lead you to be the true co-creator, co-creating from the balance point and the true knowledge that comes from the soul level. That's where reality becomes flexible. Of course not within the reality programs. A tree is a tree. You can only cut it down and transform what it is, but it's still a tree. It's still wood. You can't transform it unless you burn it or do something horrible to destroy it. So that's the only option there is of the crystalline matter. That's kind of locked into its pattern. But when we talk about the more flexible ones, water, you can still work with the energy blueprint of the water. As we know, there is still a remnant of the 4th dimensional energies in water, which is why it's easier to work with our body and our own being as the organic one with awareness, more than the innate non-organic items that are difficult to change and transform. You can shape them, but they will remain in that shape, and then that's not truly something that we could call, it doesn't give back anything. It's just innate, inanimated kind of a feature of reality that's wrongful use of current types of energies that are not leading to progression. They are part of the previous universal cycle, as I said. Water can be changed. Fire can be changed as well. We can create different types of transformational processes, and we can move things. So with that understanding, when we talk about the crystalline forces and the earth forces themselves, the best way we can operate with that is to create a balance point from where we are in balance with what we have in front of us, what is possible and what is not. How far can we change it, and to what degree should we change it? This mirrors back to a true understanding of that we are not omnipotent. We are not godlike beings, but we are creatures within a reality that has a very fine balance. And if that balance is thrown off, then there is a reciprocity rate back into a holographic energetic architecture. And with that, we can then begin to work with a higher order level of the natural laws of energy, having now gone through the more basic levels of the understanding of alchemical processes that have been associated with many different forms of crafts inside our reality, and often misunderstood, because most of the people who are practicing the craft, they're missing the point of the unification of the heart and mind and turning it into the cup, the container, the chalice, the one that carries and are able to reach and connect to the true potentials of our existence, and that is our soul. Magic is not about gaining things in the outside in the manifested world. It is about reuniting and reconnecting with our soul. Alchemical processes and alchemy is not about creating gold. It's about obtaining the true wisdom that leads to the processes where we become the cup that again can contain the true knowledge that comes from our true being and our true essence. The divine is not about something that has created us. The divine is something we hold within ourselves as male and females, as a representation of the original forces, of the original civilizations that often is associated with androgen features, as we see it in card number 21 in the tarot cards, which is a male and a female, because the veil is covering her genitals, often associated with that. Behind that, there is a male representation because he's a hermaphrodite, a kind of an anomaly, unfortunately. And again, remember, we're not talking about genitals here, but it has often within the middle age and the older types of teachings been portrayed that way. But the understanding has always been, including in some of the more obscure texts that dates back to the times, the first centuries after year zero, where there is a showing that the male and female inner levels of who and what we are must unify, not as in the male must embrace his inner female so he can become kinder, but the understanding of opening of the heart that is often associated with the female and the connection to the brain to transform that. And the female must transform her heart to be able to receive the wisdom from her brain, and then that also connect to the true levels of what her brain actually can do. And with that, we become unified, and truly the understanding of the vertical line between what is above and what is in us and how it descends into us, becoming the chalice, the cup, the container of our true soul potentials. And we understand that everything we'll do will be mirrored in the world around us, either as synchronicity when we are in balance with who and what we are and working with reality to transform not just ourselves and the levels we are made of that are of the same type of material the world is made of. So we are transforming ourselves to transform the world in a positive manner. We give back because we're made of the same. We are all one in that essence of existence. And we become the Trinity so that we understand we have the true power of becoming the chalice, becoming the cup, which is the true Trinity, from where we receive the true wisdom, which we then can work with inside reality, where we then become the masters of the three forces of reality as well. Again, a symbolic representation of the number 3, the 33 degree. Then we have the understanding of once you've done that initiation, you then are able to work with the next levels of reality that goes into the true higher order sciences of actually manifestation and co-creation, that goes from number 3, 4, and 5, where we're working with the Trinity, the cube or the 4 elements, and the true version of the pentagram within a balance point, that we understand that everything that we do and transform must be for the highest good of the many, and transform into structures and co-creation that leads to the all-seeing eye, the true divinity, the true understanding of the nature of reality, which in its essence is androgen and are kept in a very fragile balance. And we must build the bridge between the true all-seeing eye, the true version of who and what we are, the true inner God that we are, the true Elohim we are within ourselves, the true supreme powers of male and female, the true unification of all that we are, and building the bridge between the pyramid, that where we go through the step ladder up, and build the bridge between the gap and the all-seeing eye. And with that, sit on the throne next to God, as it said so often, but also become the all-seeing eye ourselves, and the true knower of worlds, and the true knower of truth, and the true knower of knowledge. And with that, we ourselves become what we have always known that we were, the true Christ consciousness, the true divine embedded into human. We become the demigods, we become the superheroes, we become the ones that we have yearned to become. And that is the original consciousness of what we once were, an advanced civilization. And that's why they used the pyramid, because that's one of the leftovers of the true civilizations. They could have used Pumapunka or Machu Picchu, but the brotherhoods are the brotherhoods, and they date back to Egypt and going back to Atlantis. So with that, we have tied the ends of that, and we don't need to contemplate more on that. Let's go to the real sciences and understand that this is what has been kept in secret societies for so long, a version of this. There are always deviations, but this is technically what it's all about. So let's unify ourselves with the understanding that what we are will be mirrored back to us from the outside if things are working perfectly. The moment we integrate ourselves with our higher order abilities, we become the cop. We turn the wheel around and we step into the true path of co-creation, where we are understanding that everything we co-create must be in balance with the elements of the reality that we are part of, and that the reality itself has little to no mercy because it's kept in a very strong balance, that if we break one thing, something else must be put in there. If there is a gap, then it must be filled out, because nature doesn't like gaps. Nature doesn't like things that are not in balance. It constantly works to rebalance itself. And if there's nothing to take from as this world, as it's going into its decay cycle, there's only one level to take from, and that is those of us who are attempting to co-create. If we are not in knowledge of what we are doing, then it's our energy system that will be depleted. Then we will be the one that will be the giver into a world that needs to fill up the gaps. If we're taking something that's not ours to take, then it will be balanced out. The price to pay will be higher than the one we are willing to give. And in that manner, we will regress and deplete ourselves. And with that, I will end this podcast. Thank you.